Hello, Gen Genies. It's me, Julie.
And Rich.
Before we get started today, we want to let you in on some exciting news. We have launched our new Patreon page for the podcast.
Woohoo! We are super excited about this new chapter for CutOff Genes.
So, Patreon is a website where listeners like you can pledge a small monthly amount. We're talking only $5 or $10, guys, to support the podcast and help defray the costs of bringing you the show each week.
To be clear, CutOff Genes will continue to be absolutely free. But to thank you for your support, we are going to offer our patrons some fun little extras.
Like early access to the podcast every week, where you'll get to hear the latest episode before it's released to the general public.
And why not make your friends jealous with exclusive patron-only CutOff Genes swag?
Fancy. And here's something you guys have been asking for, and I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going to host a monthly, hour-long, online Ask Me Anything session where patrons at the $10 level can literally ask me anything.
Anything? You're a brave woman, Julie.
You know, I know. I'm also going to give access to my blog, Are You My Father?, where I tell the story of my search, actually it's my life story basically, for my biological father in even more detail than I did on the podcast.
Wow, your blog was the original inspiration for CutOff Genes, wasn't it?
It was.
Wow. Well, all patrons at any level will receive a shout-out on the podcast along with our undying gratitude for your support.
Yep. You guys know that this show is a labor of love for me. It's something I'm very passionate about. It'd mean so much to me if you would consider supporting our work here on the podcast by going to patreon.com/CutOff Genes podcast.
That's Patreon, patreon.com/CutOff Genes podcast.
We'll add a link to it on the podcast and on the Facebook page. Thank you all, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show.
Woo!
Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip, hip, hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Genes.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon-Jackson. I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and producer of this podcast. How's it going, Julie?
It's going, Richard.
So get this. So every late afternoon, early evening, or just as the sun is setting, I take the dog for a walk, and I always run into the same people because we all have the same routine. Sure. And there's this little older lady that I always talk to. She's a cute little dog named Lucy. And the other night, she was wearing a baseball cap that had a little snake on it. And I said, "Oh, do you like snakes?"
Uh-oh.
And now, mind you, I've been talking to her since the pandemic shut down. Like, so every night I see her. And she goes, "Yes, actually, I volunteer with the snakes at the LA Zoo."
Oh.
And she told me that since they haven't had a lot of visitors to the zoo, or I guess it's been closed or whatever, and they haven't even been allowed, that the snakes have gotten, because they haven't had any attention and no one has picked them up, they've gotten more bitey.
Are they depressed?
I don't know whether it's depressed or whether they
bitey.
More bitey. And so she is a volunteer that goes in there to hold them and like massage them so that they won't be so bitey. Isn't that crazy? This little old lady, I had no idea that she's got this whole other life.
I thought this story was going a completely different way.
Where did you think it was going?
I was thinking it was a don't tread on me thing.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, no, she's got this long history. And I said to her, have you ever been bitten? And she goes, "Oh yeah, sure." She goes, "Well, I don't handle venomous snakes." I said, "Oh, well, okay." But still, that would hurt. Dogs aren't venomous, but I don't want to get bitten by one.
Exactly.
And she looks like this sweet little old lady, She's like probably, 4'10".
Yeah. When I was growing up, there was a pet shop near my house that had snakes, and they had a little girl. And they used to put her in the snake cages with the snakes, and they'd crawl all over her.
Oh, see, even when this woman was telling me the story about holding the snakes and all that, I was creeped out. Like, I don't like snakes. And
no, I do not either. I am very creeped out by them. Like, just seeing them from a distance, I don't like them. The only thing that I'm more scared of is tarantulas.
I don't like spiders and snakes.
But that ain't what it takes to love me.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Croce.
I'm right there with you.
I know you always are. But this goes to show that you never know, like, people can surprise you. And I was so kind of delighted to know that this lady spends her days with snakes.
Yeah, that's delightful. That was a delightful story. Hey, you sent me a link the other day that said, should we talk about this?
Yes.
So there was a couple in Michigan who used a surrogate to have a baby because, twins. It was twins because the mother had gone through chemo and had donated eggs beforehand so that she could still produce babies. And they used a surrogate to have the twins, and the government of Michigan has insisted that they have to adopt their own babies from the surrogate.
Right. I just thought that was so fascinating, and that it was that specific government of Michigan, right?
Right. It's very specific to Michigan. So the surrogacy laws, so Richard Vaughn, whoever that is, he's a partner of the International Fertility Law Group in Los Angeles. They're a state-by-state patchwork. Some states have comprehensive laws that explain the rights of a surrogate and the people who intend to be the parents, while others have no laws about surrogacy. In 2020, New York passed a law that lifted its ban against compensating women who act as surrogates. Louisiana prohibits compensating surrogates, but recognizes agreements or contracts in which a woman has volunteered as a surrogate. And the state allows such agreements only for married heterosexual couples. Typical.
Right.
But Michigan has a far-reaching law that does not recognize any agreement with a woman who agrees to be inseminated or implanted with an embryo. The law also does not recognize the parental rights of the intended parents, even though the babies are genetically theirs.
Yes, that's what I thought was so weird about it. And I remember when I sent it to you, I said, do you think this would be valid to discuss on the podcast? Because I wasn't sure. It's not really about DNA per se.
Well, we talk about surrogacy and donations and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so I think it's valid.
But it's so weird that they have to adopt their own children.
And at first I thought, well, maybe the wife has to adopt them because maybe they used the surrogate's egg as well as her womb.
Right.
But that is not the case.
Yeah.
So here's why it's like this in Michigan. A 1988 law known as the Surrogate Parenting Act was passed after the Baby M case. Do you remember the Baby M case?
The letter M is familiar, but I don't remember what it was
Yes, exactly,
about.
Baby M, because of the privacy of the baby.
Yes.
In which a New Jersey woman, in exchange for $10,000, agreed to a traditional surrogacy where the surrogate used her own egg to conceive a child for a couple. Already, that's wildly different. And it's in New Jersey. What's up with Michigan?
I don't know.
Why are they caring? After the baby was born, the surrogate decided to keep the baby, resulting in a series of painful court battles. Again, I see this as completely different. It's their baby. She's literally an incubator, and she volunteered.
I assume they had some legal paperwork that the state is not recognizing as valid.
Right. So the state of Michigan took the overreaching decision to not want this tragic situation to happen in their state, so they decided to prohibit it entirely. Under Michigan's law, paying a woman to act as a surrogate is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $50,000 fine.
Where do you fall on this about compensating women for becoming surrogates?
That's a good question. I believe women who are surrogates should definitely be compensated because it's wear and tear on their body.
Yes.
It's kind of like they're an independent contractor.
Well, I mean, honestly, yeah. I mean, I can see how it could be abused with people who really are in need of money. But I also, it's like, could you do me a favor? Could you carry this baby for me for 9 months? That's a huge favor to do for nothing. Yeah,
that's a lofty request.
That's a lofty request.
Yeah.
It's not like, could you drive me to the market?
Right. Exactly. It's not just like, a little time out of your day. It's 9 months.
Right. So, I mean, I can see that there would be ways that could be abused. But I also, I can't shake this nagging feeling that it is a way for the government to further exert control over a woman's choice to do with what she wants with her body.
Yeah. I will agree with that.
In terms of like, no, you can't be paid for this. We want to control whether or not what you do and what you choose to do with your body. And if a woman chooses to be a surrogate to help somebody out,
yeah,
we're going to have something to say about that.
Exactly. And again, and the birth certificate that was issued has the mother's name and her husband as the father because she happens to be married to him. So legally, whoever you're married to is listed as the father, which is an outright lie on an original birth certificate. It's once again, let's pretend this didn't happen.
It's an assumption. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
right.
and it's an assumption based on, the majority, but it's not ironclad, as we all know.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because the surrogate thinks it's crazy too. And her husband, hello.
So the only one who has something to say in this is the government. I mean, like everyone, all the parties involved in this transaction and this relationship, they are all on the same page. No one is saying, no, it's my baby. No, it's my baby. No, it's my baby.
And it seems to be up to whichever judge they get too.
Oh, really? Is that so?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mr. Roddy said other judges in the state had granted parental rights when a biological father sought them. In January, just before the twins were born, Mr. Myers, along with Ms. Vermeil, who is the surrogate, filed another motion asking the court to grant Mr. Myers potential parental rights. But 4 days after they were born, a different judge, Scott Noto, denied the request, saying he was being asked to validate a contract that state had deemed void. This couple, it also says that they knew it was going to be a problem in the state that they lived in, but they didn't want to go elsewhere because they wanted to be close to the surrogate who lived in Michigan. They'd advertised for her on Facebook, which is kind of weird.
Oh God. I wonder now that we're talking about this, that I'm going to start getting ads on my Facebook about like surrogates because every time I think the phone is always listening to me because, no matter what I say, I get an ad about it. Yeah.
It is. The things that literally moments after I will say something will pop up. It's clearly, yeah.
Oh, good. I can't wait to see these ads for surrogates.
Oh, boy.
Or girl.
Well, I think that they're, or girl.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think it's more like, it's not a real advertisement, but they have like a page.
I see. Well, anyway, I'm glad that it was that article was good fodder for the podcast. But honestly, I'd be interested to hear what our listeners think about that. Just you can post it in the group Facebook page what you think about this law, and maybe there's another side to it that I'm not seeing. And I'm certainly not a scholar on this, but it's interesting
Seems
that only one
state
in the union would have this particular law.
Right. Well, Emily Still, our who is an egg donor, our Australian egg donor friend, she might have something to say about it. And of course, remember in Australia, any of this has to be completely altruistic. It's completely illegal to offer money or to take money for anything that has to do with reproductive volunteering.
Right. And again, I'm sure this is based in a history of child trafficking, so...
You think?
Yeah, I do. I mean, okay, I do. That and the whole.
I think it's based in them being scared about the whole Baby M thing.
Maybe.
So remember when last we spoke about the biological father of the twins that are my clients when I sent him a respectful letter?
Yes.
And he was freaking out about his invasion of privacy, even though it was a private letter addressed to him. So, and he, and I remember at the time I was like, I don't think he was his best person in that moment.
Yes. And he went to a building or something he said he'd never owned or he hadn't owned in years or something.
Yes.
But he still
the whole
got the
thing
letter.
Had him freaked out.
Right.
Yes. He still got the letter and nobody else had read it. It was still his secret to keep if he wanted to.
Right.
So, and he never knew about it, which I absolutely believe.
He never knew that
he had fathered
a child. Yes.
A child. Correct. And this was long before he was married, by the way. It was when he was in college. He called me back like a week later and was in a very different state of mind. He was much more calm and just asked me questions about their mother, who she was, if they had known her, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, I'm going to have a family meeting tonight with my kids, and we're all going to talk about what to do about this. He just seemed much more reasonable.
Well, that sounds like a very adult thing to do. I'm not going to keep a secret. I'm going to actually call a meeting with my family and discuss this. And this is what's happening. And
correct. So it was a much more, and he said, this happened to a friend of mine and it didn't end well. And I'm like, this exact same thing. And I venture to say it didn't end well because the friend wasn't happy to hear about it.
Yes.
That's usually the case, but I didn't get into it with him. So it was a good phone call. So I immediately texted my client and said, just spoke to your father. He's in a different place. He's having a meeting with his family tonight. So fingers crossed. And so it was good. And I was looking forward to hearing how that all went. Well, a couple days later, I get forwarded an email that came from him to my client. And let's just say it was shocking.
In what way?
In that he became that guy in the first phone call again.
Oh, no.
And just said the most demeaning things about their mother, basically calling her, a hookup at a party. And he can't understand why they would want to know who their father is. And just stuff that... and talking about how he's a good person, and he's not the person that he was back then, as if he was being accused of being a specific kind of person.
Yeah, right. I mean, that happens to so many people, and people have hookups at parties or whatever.
I know. We all have a past, and nobody's accusing him of anything, of being a deadbeat dad or anything. We're quite aware that men get off scot-free when this happens most of the time.
Right.
So I got this letter from my client, and I proceeded to do a little editorial where after each offensive thing he said, I wrote in italics what the subtext of what he was saying.
I just don't understand why he wrote, unless he's like bipolar or something, why he chose to write this email and to disparage their mother when the mother was not disparaging him, right? I mean, did we even know the mother?
Yeah, she found them. She looked for them and found them before she has passed away. Right. So at that, he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so right. This is so spot on." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trigger you. I hope." Because then he just went ahead and friend requested the sisters on Facebook. He said, "Well, forget that. I'm going to do what I want to do. I tried to be respectful."
Now, by the sisters, you mean
the half sisters, his daughters, who are adults in their 20s and have children of their own.
Okay.
Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Oh, are you sure?"
Because you don't know what they think of the situation either, right?
Well, no. In the letter, it was clear he hadn't told them yet.
Oh.
So that family meeting didn't happen.
Here I am saying, patting him on the back and saying, "Oh, he's being so adult." But yeah.
Well, we thought that's what was going to happen. But I think he'd had a conversation with his wife, and it sounded like maybe the wife was more freaked out than anybody. Which is, again, insane because long before they were married.
I know, but a lot of people in relationships do not like to hear. They want to be in denial that their partner has never been in any other relationship or had sex with anybody else but them.
If you think that your husband does not have a past,
right,
and did not, I mean, that's insane.
It's not that you don't think that they do. It's just that, I know a lot of people who sort of want to assume, or they just don't want to hear about it. And so this is just another reminder that, my husband had sex before he was with me.
Sure. But let's get a grip on reality.
Well, let's be adults.
I think everybody needs to be prepared for this. I've been prepared for this for years. My husband has a past. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. So that was the last I heard. Then he wrote a scathing response to the biological father that was so well written and so just like, here's what you're saying to me and here's how it sounds to me and blah, blah, blah. And really let him have it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, we're off.
Yeah.
And then the next day, he sent me a copy of the response from the father who said, clearly, I shouldn't have done this by email. Let's talk. I think what he was saying was my words came out wrong and my intention came out wrong and I didn't proofread it and all this stuff. And he was kind of calling himself out for being. So last I heard, they had spoken, and the client said, well, it was actually pretty good, and he feels he's just really freaked out. He comes from a very small town, and I feel like, and he was like, if this is the last I hear from him, I'm satisfied.
Right. He's got the answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So hopefully the good things will happen. The sisters at that point had not gotten the requests. The message requests on Facebook, but he's like, how could they not see the message request? I'm like, you don't know how Facebook works, do you? Because a lot of people don't even realize there's such a thing as a message request.
I'm beginning to wonder if this guy has some kind of, I'm not a doctor, but a personality disorder, because the way you've described now, he has been two different people in the discussions with you and with this email, and then the talk with his son.
I think he is being influenced by his wife and his standing in who he thought he was and who people thinks he is, which has not changed, but probably I'm sure he's very conservative, and his world has
turned upside down. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for the update on that, Julie. I'm going to ponder that as we take a break. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Genes Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
All right, we're back. I have a combination of From the Trenches and Native American genealogy factoids.
Oh, good.
Yeah. This was I teased it in the Facebook group a little bit, which was fun because people hate it when I tease things. But this is something that happened on a case I was on actually last weekend. I was supposed to take the weekend off, and it ended up spending the entire weekend trying to solve this because it was making me crazy. So I have a client that was, in his words, born in an Indian hospital in Arizona.
All right.
He had documents, and he actually, a name for his mother was on his documents, a very specific name.
All right.
And which is very helpful. With women, it is difficult because they get married and lose their maiden name all the time, which does make it hard to find people.
Yes.
But so he said, yeah, but you know what's weird is look at my ethnicity estimate. It says I have 24% Native American, United States and Canada, which is different than Native American, Southern United States, Mexico,
right?
Which is most of what I see in most Native American ethnicities. It usually goes down and shows parts of Mexico as being their origin regions.
Okay.
And of course, my instinct, because I always say, take your ethnicity with a grain of salt, even though it is helpful in more specific cases. But I said, yeah, don't worry about that so much. That's not really that important. It's more about just the actual DNA. So I proceeded to work on it. Now, there was a very significant, tons and tons of matches on one particular line that was based in Oklahoma. They had lots and lots of documentation of their Cherokee heritage. So I knew that he had to be part Cherokee, obviously. I contacted my friend Leah Larkin, who is my scientific DNA guru, and she said, wow, I have never seen that high a Native American estimate that is not a Latinx. So, and I thought so too, especially because almost all of the matches on this specific line where I knew the name that I was looking for in this line was, they had about 2% Native American DNA. And he had 24% Native American DNA. So I was getting more and more frustrated. I basically had identified a couple a most recent common couple on that line. But the more I looked for who it could be, the more confused I got, because they were, again, solidly in the Oklahoma area. He was born in Arizona, and I knew that there had to be a whole other line where that Native American had come from. So finally, I realized that when I did my initial leads method color sorting of the matches, I usually color sort every single match that is over 100 centimorgans. That's the cutoff. But in going back through it, I realized that there was one that had not been color coded yet that was 125 centimorgans. I'd somehow missed it. And I clicked on that. And what do you know? 50% Native American DNA.
Oh, there you go.
And there was a whole other line attached to her, but she was the highest. I mean, it went to 125 to 100 and then below that. So not very close, but very specific names in her, what tree she had. I knew that at least who her grandfather was, so I could build off of that.
Oh, good.
Yes. So I realized, okay, so whoever this guy is over here, or this person is over here, had relations with whoever is on this line, and that's where his mother came from.
Okay.
So worked. Just basically at this point, I'm just building out until something jumps out at me. And I finally this is why we build out as much as we can, even though it seems like it's going to be fruitless, but sometimes things pop up. And all of a sudden, on one of these lines, the surname of the mother in the non-identifying, well, no, it's identifying in the information came up as one of the married names for this particular woman, that particular name. I was like, bingo, there it is. So I built her part of the tree out, realized, yes, this totally fits with the other ones, but who is the father? Went back and was able to connect one of the potential fathers on the other line, or grandfathers on the other line, to this woman, in that he was in North Dakota, where everybody else was in Oklahoma at this particular time. And all of these people were from North Dakota. So I started looking the bottom line is I never found a marriage for these people to each other, even though that name had been, clearly she had been with this guy. I don't know if she had been legally married to him, but it's just not in any of the records.
Right. But that's common, right? I mean, people don't necessarily
Yes, absolutely.
get married.
But isn't it, I mean, my instinct is that it's an MPE, that I figured out an MPE. So I figured out, I know who the biological mother is.
Yeah.
She's living. And she, all her life, went by her mother's husband's surname. But clearly, judging by the DNA, she was of this other line.
I see.
So when we talk to her, we may be addressing an NPE that she herself never knew about. She may think she is genetically of that line. So now we're in a place where when I explain to her, well, gosh, all of these people are related to you. That's how that's your grandfather. And she might go, that's not my grandfather.
Right.
In which case I'll say, yeah, here's another surprise. It is.
Wow.
So
not only are you, you're saying to this woman, you are the birth mother of this person, but you are also an NPE yourself.
Yes.
And you didn't know it.
Right. Exactly. And I don't, we may not get to that. And this is one of those situations where I don't know if I would volunteer that information if it never comes up.
She's not your client.
She is not my client. And even though I always stay on the side of truth.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, I will probably say, was your mother, before your mother was married to your father, was she married to this guy? And just see what she says. Because I'm fascinated by how this might play out.
Well, that's a tricky kind of ethical situation that you're in now because
right, because she didn't ask for this.
She did not ask. So
right. I mean, I believe she should be contacted as the mother of him, and I think she will probably
that's
accept
not what I mean.
him
I'm talking about as far as her
yes.
her parentage. You know.
Yes, she didn't ask.
Right. But I mean, she could also say, "Well, prove that I'm the mother," and then if you had to go back through the tree in order to do that, well, then that. To me says, well, you have to tell her, well, this is what I found.
As I delved into this family, as I stalked them on social media, they're Sioux. They're the Lakota subset of the Sioux Nation. Okay. And they're very spiritual. They're very into their heritage. And I feel like I learned something about the Lakota and the Sioux.
How interesting.
Doing this. It is really interesting. And it kind of felt very peaceful, actually, as I was learning about this family. They're so prideful of their heritage, and it's such a part of their life. And
is there a lot of, in your experience, is there a lot of this NPE in American Indian culture?
No. Well, I have very little experience. That's why I was excited to talk about this. I have very little experience in the Native American.
I mean, the reason why I ask is that because what you just said about the whole spirituality and the connection in the family and all of that, which you could really say in any culture, but specifically in the American Indian, you go, okay, well, are a lot of American Indians put up for adoption?
Oh, I'm sure there was a time when Native American children were taken from their parents and adopted by white people. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That happened in Australia a lot too. The half-caste kids, what they call half-caste.
With the indigenous, yes.
They would literally kidnap these children and give them to white families.
Right.
Which was another stain on the history of both countries. I wanted to also go back and talk about the whole Cherokee thing. Why did all of these Cherokee people only have 1% to 2% DNA, Native American DNA?
Okay.
And I think that is a sign of the Cherokee Nation as a whole rejecting DNA testing and rejecting the results of DNA and not being interested in identifying their people by DNA. So I think that's what skews it low, I think. Also, I also did a little research in trying to figure out the Cherokee. How do you identify Cherokee in your DNA? And a lot of people say that Cherokee DNA comes across as much more European DNA in their ethnicity.
How interesting.
That probably has to do with them being invaded by Europeans.
Probably.
I don't know.
I was just, even as we were talking a few minutes ago, I was thinking, I was using the term American Indian because that's probably showing my age. And then you were saying Native American. I'm like, I hope American Indian is not offensive.
Well, you know what's interesting is that, yes, my instinct is to say Native American. However, while I was researching this family, they all call themselves Indians.
Well, there you go.
So I think it's something that it's okay to say if you are one of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But you want, anyway, as someone who is not one of them, I would like to use the proper terminology.
Sure.
And I'll, like I said, you tell me what you want to be called, and I would be happy to call you that.
Yes. Right? Yes. Tell me what you want to be called.
But when I was growing up, we said American Indian, and I believe that was.
Yes.
But I believe that was to distinguish from people who were from India, who were Indians from India.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. When my mother was growing up, they used the term. I've told you this before. I think they used the term like female black women were negresses.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I found that so offensive. When I first moved to the U.S., my mother is from Montana, and on our first trip to Montana, my mother was very excited to show me the Squaw Rock. It's called the Squaw Rock. And what it was it's on some hill somewhere, and at a certain angle when you drive by, it looks like a Native American woman with a papoose, holding her baby in front of her, and there was a legend that some squaw had jumped to her death there or something. I always thought that was fascinating.
That's a good story.
It was mystical. Anywho, should we take a break?
Let's do that.
Thank you for listening to CutOff Genes with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/CutOff Genes podcast. Now, back to the program.
All right, we're back for story time.
Yes, we're going to continue the story of Jessica Stavena.
Correct. This is part 3 of Jessica Stavena's epic Odyssey. Just to remind you, Jessica was donor conceived, found out recently that her donor was her mother's gynecologist. And more siblings are popping up, and there was a donor number that was used that is common amongst them all. And so we're going to hear her tell us about that.
This is a good reason to go to a female gynecologist.
Yeah, it is. Good point.
Let's listen in.
So what's really wild is that my mom and Eve's mom, we were born the same year, were going to him within days of each other, and he was documenting donor 106 at their times. And so we have the purchasing records from California Cryobank for the years that he was purchasing sperm. The number of times that he documented using 106 just on my mom and Eve's mom exceeds the number of vials that he purchased.
So,
just on our 2 moms.
Was he trying to save money?
I'm 100% sure that it was a couple things. I think he's very greedy. So, of course, that's money pocketed right into him that he's not having to pay a donor or cryobank for sperm. And I feel like he's very narcissistic, that he just thought, you know what, my sperm is superior to these. And I don't know. It's a very deep, dark hole that I feel like we would have to dive in when it comes to his thinking on why he did this. And believe that he did anything wrong, and he doesn't understand why we're not grateful and thankful that he did what he did. And he's still in practice today. Right now, today, he saw patients all day long.
That's crazy. I mean, so obviously can he be sued?
So here's the thing. In Texas, there's no civil cause of action to come after him because it's been 30 plus years, and it was at the time it was not illegal. It did not become a law in Texas until September 2019 is when the fertility fraud bill got passed.
Gotcha.
That Eve lobbied.
Gotcha.
So till then it was not illegal. However, after finding out and discovering this, about a week or so after I discovered, I actually filed a formal complaint with the Texas Medical Board regarding his behavior, his unethical behavior, and the deception behind my conception, and gave them medical records, wrote a statement out. My mom then also filed a formal complaint against him on the Texas Medical Board, and Eve's mom as well. So in September last year, September 2020, we had a hearing. It's called an ISC with the Texas Medical Board, and basically it's a closed-door hearing to try to resolve the issue. Closed doors and not make it a public thing where everything's public record, and it doesn't go on his license yet, I guess.
Right.
So we had that in September, and basically what we had to do is they reviewed my complaint, my mom's complaint, Eve's mom's complaint, and then Dr. Jody Madeira, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. She's a law professor in Indiana, and she specializes in fertility fraud.
Okay.
So she had also filed a complaint in 2019, and the Texas Medical Board basically said they didn't get it, so it's kind of swept under the rug. Crazy.
Wow.
So we they actually set a trial date for March. Then they moved it to May because of COVID, and then they moved it to September. And I was really certain that they were probably just going to keep moving it. because of COVID. And I was like, never going to happen. So they ended up keeping the September date. They didn't change it. And so I was just nervous that he was going to refuse to, not show up at that hearing. So we had the IFC trial, and I had to, myself, Eve's mom, and then Dr. Madeira, we all had to give our testimonies virtually in front of the board, several board members. And then after it was completed, they said, we're probably not going to have any decisions until March 2021. So this was September 2020. So it was going to be, like 6 months until we were going to have a decision or any information. And so, so I just kind of was like, all right, there's more waiting. Here we go. Well, they ended up pushing our case into the next board meeting. The Texas Medical Board only meets 4 times a year to discuss all these complaints and, and do decisions on pulling licenses or suspending them or, whatever their disciplinary actions are based on the complaints. So they ended up pushing our case to the October board meeting. So in October, they discussed our case and they came up with the decision, which I'm only assuming it was to revoke his license because of what's going to happen next. So they came up with a decision. They then sent whatever their course of action was from the Texas Medical Board to him and his lawyer. Well, basically they can either accept it or they can decline it. And then the Texas Medical Board can then come back with okay, then here, let's do this, or decline his decline situation.
So he declined to accept the decision?
Yep.
And their decision was to revoke his license?
I'm assuming that's exactly what it was.
Oh, you don't know. Okay.
I don't know because at this point they can't disclose any decisions made until it's actually set in stone. They can't disclose it to me or Dr. Madeira.
Gotcha.
So he declined it, and so when the Texas Medical Board went to go back to give their this is our reply back to your decline. In order to make sure that this did not get pushed to make it public record, he then filed for a temporary injunction to make sure that the Texas Medical Board was not allowed to pursue any disciplinary action at the time. So now they're not able to then tell them, okay, this is still your disciplinary action. And then he filed a restraining order against the Texas Medical Board and claimed trial by media, stating that the Texas Medical Board was trying him by media and playing into all the media presence that's out there about my story and Eve's story.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, yeah. And his lawsuit for the temporary injunction and the restraining order is like a 54, 58 page lawsuit. And the Texas Medical Board, their reply back to that was a 1-pager.
Wow.
So basically the board said, okay, if you're accusing us of all this and you're not in the wrong, prove it. So this is where we're at, is that
prove the ethics behind this.
Prove that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where as far as any legal action, this is where we're at. It's on the level of the Texas Medical Board is then trying to pursue disciplinary action against him. And every other doctor in this case, they give up their license. They either retire or they say, here's my license. But he is continuing to fight it.
Oh, I'd love to hear his argument.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to send you this 54-page document.
Oh, boy.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Some light reading.
Yeah, exactly, right? So at this point, whenever I'm discovered, I'm number 5 on the list that's now discovered, right? Okay, so that was February 2020. Fast forward to Father's Day, Sunday, June, I believe that was like the 21st or something. We get a notification that we have another sibling, a half-brother, pop up. So we have this half-brother pop up, and myself and the 2 other half-sisters were in the group message. We're like, oh my God, another one popped up. So we knew before he knew his results popped up. So we jump on and we request to connect with him, and we go on social and trying to figure out which one, because there's multiple people with the same name. which one he is, and we see that this particular one is from Nacogdoches, from East Texas. He doesn't live there now, but we're like, oh my God, it has to be him. So we request the friendship, and we Facebook message him, and we're like, oh my God, we see your connection. We're your half sister, blah, blah, blah. He had no idea he was donor conceived at all.
My Lord.
Whatsoever. So when we message him and then he goes to look at his results and see that, it's just like, oh my God. Well, with him, his wife's family always joked about how he looks like the doctor, because after the 2020 episode story aired with Eve, and they're talking about him, his wife's family kept joking, oh my God, you look like him. And he's like, I'm not donor conceived. It's not my dad, whatever. It's not like Houston where we have 500,000 doctors where you wouldn't just pinpoint one particular person. But in East Texas, there is only, at the time, there was only one fertility doctor. He was the one that women, he was the gynecologist to go to, so he was like the doctor. It's a very small town. I'm talking, there may have been 1,000 people at the time.
So he's known in the community already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And when he was in college, when he went to SFA, the college there in Nacogdoches, people would tell him all the time that he looked like a McMorris kid, that he looked like, and they would ask him, is your dad a gynecologist? Is your dad? He would get that. And, being a teenager, a young, 19, 20-year-old in college, you're like, and your boy, you're like, haha, funny, whatever. So it just kind of all, I guess, came together for him. And that night he finally reached out. He's like, I don't even know how to have this conversation with my mom. She's never told me. We're like, well, the best way to be is transparent and honest. That is the only way you're going to get anywhere. And at this point, your entire life, you're the secret.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, let's pull away the Band-Aid, and, we're adults, right? Mm-hmm. So he finally called his mom, and she confirmed, and he has a younger sister. And so he also asked, is my younger sister, is she also donor conceived? And his mom confirmed yes. Well, at the time his younger sister was in the hospital, she had just had to have she was having heart issues, and, she was in the hospital. And so her mom was actually in the hospital with her, in the hospital room with her, when all this was kind of going down. And so he was like, do you want to tell her? Do you want me to tell her? What do you want to do? Well, then she gets off the phone with our brother, and then tells her his younger sister, listen, here's the scoop. You're donor conceived, while she's hooked up all these monitors in the hospital bed.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, oh my God, I guess it's a place to give somebody a heart attack.
Yeah.
So ends up telling her, and he purchases 23andMe kit, has shipped to her to have her do it to see if she's our sibling as well. Mm-hmm. Well, July 18th, I was actually in East Texas meeting this particular brother and a couple of the other siblings for the first time. And as soon as I got done meeting them, and we had lunch, we hung out for a few hours, probably 5 or 6 hours. I was leaving to come back to Houston, and the notification popped up that his little sister is also our little sister.
Oh my gosh. They're full siblings then.
They are.
Wow.
Yep, they are. Wow. They're full siblings. So from leaving there to come back to Houston, I drove about an hour out of my way to go meet her, go say hi, give her a big neck, and then I had to, get back on the road. So that was in July that her results came in, that she was ours. So there's that. So we're now at 7, and this is July 2020, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward to December, we have another half-brother pop up. Yep, December 17th, I believe, was the exact date that his notification popped up.
Did he know?
He had no idea he was conceived.
I mean, what is wrong with these parents who think it's a good idea to keep that a secret from their children? Well, I don't understand.
Is that he was telling patients, our mothers, to never disclose to us that we were donor conceived, because it would do psychological damage. He very much stressed that with our parents.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course he would. Wow.
exactly. Like, don't tell nobody. But he also, you know, again, this is very, we're all from these little teeny tiny small towns. So it's like you've got this little teeny tiny pond with little sub ponds inside of it. Mm-hmm. So we're all just, you know, 5-10 minutes away from each other. 30 minutes away, 20 minutes away. We're literally from all these small towns that are all next to each other. Teeny tiny towns of people that do not leave.
Right.
People don't leave East Texas. Most people don't leave East Texas. There's an exception. You know, there are some people, and some of us did leave East Texas, thankfully, because like I probably would have ended up with a sibling by the direction we're going.
All right. That is the end of part 3. It just keeps getting weirder and weirder.
This might be one of the longest ones we've ever had as far as I think it is.
I think 4 is as long as we've gone.
Yes.
But on the final installment, she's going to talk a little bit about the emotional impact this has had on her and other people.
Wow.
Because that's important.
Yes.
Yeah. So look forward to that for the next episode. In the meantime,
I am Richard Castle, and you can go to my website, richardcastle.com, to learn all about what I'm doing when I'm not here. Or you can follow me on the Twitter or on Instagram at Castle Songs.
my name is Julie Dixon Jackson. You can find me on Twitter at Jules Jackson with 2 O's. Find the podcast at CutOff Jeans Pod. Join the Facebook group, CutOff Jeans Podcast. And send me an email, julesjackson@cutoffjeans.com. In the meantime, always remember...
What is that, Julie?
The truth is in your jeans.